this whole world over.
And the therapist, we have mentioned several times and will be mentioning over and over again those 4 words. What upholds your existence?
As happy as me, you'll never see.
What is hypnosis? The word comes from the Greek word hypnos, which means sleep. So you would assume that hypnosis has something to do with sleep, or else why would it be called hypnosis? I thought about that a long, long time ago, and even joked to myself that I should start a campaign worldwide to change it to some other name, since it wasn't sleep, but I didn't think it would meet with much approval, so I never started that campaign. I don't think I ever will. We'll leave it at hypnosis for now. But it's not sleep. That's not to say that people don't fall asleep in hypnosis. Many's the time, I would say on average, maybe 6 times a month inside of there, people who see me privately. Sometimes they work late, they come in, they're tired, they get into that recliner, and I put them through progressive relaxation leading to hypnosis, and they'll fall asleep. So all I do is just kind of tap them and say, stay alert. And when you're first learning hypnosis, there's a fine line between falling into hypnosis and falling asleep. And you learn to adjust it as you go along. Some people tell me that the first 3 or 4 months, they constantly fall asleep, but at one particular point, and they're happy because they're happy to be falling asleep. And gradually you begin to adjust it. You learn what your fine lines are, and you learn to continue into it without falling asleep. But it is not sleep, because we cannot learn while we're sleeping. We have to be alert to learn. There are some schools of thought that say that we can learn while we're asleep. They're confusing learning and absorbing. We can absorb through our senses everything, but purely on a sense level. Smells, sights, hearing, noises, we can absorb those things. In fact, we start learning to do that. We start doing it quite naturally during the 3rd trimester, while we're still in our mother's womb. We're absorbing things. I'll tell you a quick funny story about that. I have a close, dear friend, Neil Selden, who's very vociferous. He is a poet and a playwright, and he's got a presence about him. Anyway, we were living in Greece, and my wife, Nan, and I were preparing for our 4th child. Nan was in her 8th month when Neil and his wife visited us in Greece. And they stayed for about a month, and our daughter Ellie was born about 2 weeks later. Anyway, Ellie, who now lives in New Jersey, had never met Neil and Lee. But she'd heard a lot about them through my wife and I. And about, I guess it was maybe 11 months ago, she finally actually met Neil. And she went to their house in New Jersey, and Neil opened the door and smiled, his big broad smile, and gave her a big hug and greeted her. Anyway, she called me that evening to tell me how unusual the experience was. I said, why? She said, as soon as I heard his voice, I knew him. And I don't know how, because I've never heard his voice. And I said, you have heard his voice while you were in the womb. So we can absorb sounds, but we can't distinguish what those are. We can't discern what they are. And I cannot put on some earphones and put in a CD to learn Italian and go to sleep and wake up in the morning speaking Italian. Won't happen. Hypnosis is a learning experience. So we have to be alert. So it's not sleep. The other word that is most often associated with hypnosis is the word trance. How many of you heard that word? And that's a big word. And it's a very heavy word. When you think of trance, you know, it's not light. You think of zombies, you know, in a trance. Bela Lugosi, look deep into my eyes, I'm going to put you into a trance. You know, deep, heavy stuff. And to the observer watching someone in hypnosis, they might think that the person is in a trance. Not really. Sometimes you are borderline. You're in so deep that someone looking at you would go, oh, wow, you really are zoned out somewhere else. But you're still alert. So it's not sleep and it's not trance. So what is it? In a word, hypnosis is relaxation. Relaxation. And an additional component, focus. That is what hypnosis is comprised of. Relaxation and focus. No rocket science, no great psychology to study and understand, no long sentences, relaxation and focus. But that doesn't explain why it works. I go back to the age of 7. My mother took my brother and I, my brother 3 years older than I, to Low State Theater in New York City. Low State Theater was a major vaudeville house. Are any of you out there old enough to remember vaudeville? Giving away your age. For those who don't know, vaudeville was stage acts. A bill of usually 8, 9, 10 different acts. They'd have a singer and a dancer, a ventriloquist, etc. and so on. And at Low State, they frequently had stage hypnotists. And in fact, I'd been watching stage hypnotism from the time I was about 3.5 years old. My mother would take us to Low State all those times. And I was fascinated by the stage hypnotist, but also a bit frightened, because it was a mystery. I didn't know why people were doing what they were doing. And because it was unknown to me, it kind of left me kind of a bit tense. And on this particular day, the stage hypnotist was introduced, and of course they always came out with a young, lovely young assistant, you know, always with a short skirt. That was standard. And he asked for volunteers, and the young lady went right down the steps into the audience, and my brother grabbed my elbow and stuck it up in the air. And so she came right over to me and took my hand and started walking me. I'm the first volunteer. And I was scared. There were about 800 to 1,000 people in the house that day. And I was a very overweight young boy and very self-conscious. I didn't like being in crowds. I mean, I remember the first time I was at a birthday party where there were maybe 15 kids, I was nervous. So being in front of 800 to 1,000 people with the lights on me and everyone watching me was scary. And she took me up the steps and walked me right up to the hypnotist, who put his arms around me in very fatherly fashion, and he asked me 2 quick questions. As I recall, he asked me if the lights were bothering me at all. Hot, bright, big lights. And then he asked me if I would have fun. And I'm not even sure what I said. I think I nodded. And he smiled and said, good. And he walked me over to a chair and sat me down. And for a moment, I felt even more frightened, because now I'm alone on that stage, sitting in a chair, looking out at this audience. And I then looked and saw that there were about 15 or 20 people lined up, other volunteers. I didn't know that he was putting us through a process. The process relates to a word, a term that's frequently used in hypnosis, suggestibility. The stage hypnotist has only seconds to determine if you are suggestible or not. Because if you're not, he doesn't want you up on that stage. If he asks you to quack like a duck and you stand there, he's going to look pretty bad. So he's got to be certain, and he usually is, They're experts at reading people, body language, the look in their eye, whatever, but they really are expert at that, and they'll know. And rarely do they make the mistake of selecting someone who is not suggestible. So he was putting these people through a process. And of the 15 or 20 people, only 7 of us wound up sitting on that stage. The rest were given a nice round of applause, and the young lady escorted them back to the seat. And then there were the 7 of us sitting up on that stage. And he walked over to a man who I would have judged to have been in his 40s, and he said to the man, "Close your eyes. You're going into a very, very deep trance, and I am going to count to 3, and at the count of 3 you will open your eyes, and you will stand up, and you will discover that your butt is missing." And of course, he went 1, 2, 3, boom, and the guy, "Oh, come on, now, don't do this to me, please." Now, watching this guy going through this, discovering that his butt is missing, what struck me was that the guy was genuine. He was not pretending or acting that, he wasn't a plant. He was genuine. He had, for all intents and purposes, lost his butt and was worried. He wanted to know what was going on. And the stage hypnotist spent about 6 or 7 minutes with setting him up for this and getting him to do certain things. And finally, when the guy got very desperate, said, "Come on, please." The hypnotist said, "Well, I think it's in the 3rd row, that seat back over there." And of course, he ran down the 3rd row and found his butt. And everyone had a big laugh out of it. And then he came over to me and he looked at me and said, "Close your eyes, son." I closed my eyes, and the very next thing I know is the young lady's walking me back to my seat, and the people are applauding, and I didn't know what had happened. Nothing happened. I'm just suddenly, close your eyes, then I'm being walked back to my seat. And I sit down. I wanted to glare at my brother for what he did. But as soon as my butt hit the seat, I immediately looked at my watch. And I'm saying to myself, why am I staring at my watch? I want to watch the show. Something funny is happening up there, but I'm watching my watch. And I'm watching the watch for 5 minutes exactly. And after 5 minutes, I get up and I start running around the aisles of Low State Theater singing, "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy, Yankee Doodle do or die," a popular song in those years. George M. Cohen wrote it, I believe. And as I'm running through the aisles singing this, what's going on in my mind at the same time is, how is this happening? I'm this, self-conscious little chubby kid running around singing. I don't do this. But I did do it. Why did that guy lose his butt? And why did I get up and run around singing, "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy"? Anyone who doesn't know the answer ready? Which Lisa does. Anyone who doesn't know the answer from a previous class want to venture a guess at why? Guessing is okay.
You were susceptible to suggestion?
Yeah, okay. But
And willing to do whatever they suggested, with that particular suggestion?
yeah,
Maybe
you're very close to it.
Into something you really wanted to do?
Right.
You were under the influence.
What?
You were under the influence of hypnosis.
Yeah.
You weren't
But-
against it.
What?
You weren't against it.
No. All those things are true.
Something to do with your subconscious.
Yeah, yes and no, either way. But what it really is, it's so simple. You go along with it. Again, simple language, nothing complicated. Why did that guy go along with losing his butt? He wanted to have fun. He probably went home that night to his family and friends and said, "Guess what happened to me today at Low State Theater in front of 1,000 people? You won't believe this, but I actually lost my butt." If he's alive, he's still probably telling the story. Why did I get up and sing? Why did I go along with it? I wanted to sing. I had wanted to sing from the time I was 3 years of age. I recall at the age of about 4.5 or 5, my mother took me into one of these booths, and they were there in New York at the time, where you could go in, put a quarter in a slot, and you could record your voice talking or singing for 3 minutes, and then you'd get a little recording. And I even remember what I sang. I sang a song called Mamselle, and I had that record for many years. And in fact, I became a professional singer. How did this guy know? How did he pick up on any of those clues? What did he read when he said, "Are you going to have fun?" I don't know. All I know is he was right on the money. I wanted to sing, and he gave me a post-hypnotic suggestion that after sitting in my seat 5 minutes later, I would get up and sing loud and clear for all of the people at Low State Theater, and I did. So that's why hypnosis works. We go along with it. Someone contacts me about quitting smoking. They come in and see me. They want to quit smoking, so they go along with me. You want to lose weight, you go along with it. Pretty simple. That's only part of it, though. There's another major reason why hypnosis works. And for this, I'm going to take it into a deeper area. When I was 13, I started having headaches, very serious headaches. I thought they were just bad headaches. And then one evening I listened to one of my favorite radio programs called Exploring the Unknown, and they had a story that night about a man who was suffering from severe headaches to the extent where it was really affecting his life drastically. He could no longer work, function. At a certain point he was almost suicidal, and at the end of the story he went to some hospital and he was treated. And what they labeled it, they came out with the name migraine headache. And I suddenly realized I got one of those babies. I'm suffering from migraine headaches, not just ordinary headaches. And it was a turning point in my life. I didn't realize it at the time. Getting the actual label, or what you might call the diagnosis of what it was, has a drastic effect on human beings. Whether the label is migraine or depression or whatever it might be, that label has impact on the mind, and it certainly had an impact on my mind. And I suffered from these headaches for 13 years. And when I was overseas, they got so bad while I was in the military that they sent me to Johns Hopkins, where they send presidents. And I spent 4 days at Johns Hopkins, and at the end of the 4 days, I sat down with a very, very nice guy, a colonel, who was very polite and genuine, I felt, and compassionate. And he said, "We've given you every test we have. We've given you every kind of injection, every pill, everything we have to treat migraine headaches, and it's not successful. In fact, you're an oddball chemically. You don't seem to respond to anything. And we can see what's going on. Your blood vessels are dilating, causing the pressure, causing the migraine, but we don't know what the origin is, and we don't know how to treat it, and we're sorry." And if anything, I was a bit relieved, just knowing that I had been in this famous hospital, and they had done their best, and they couldn't solve the problem. And I figured, well, I'm going to have to live with them. And I kept on living with them, and they got worse and worse and worse. And 3.5, 4 years later, I'm living in Cleveland, Ohio, and the headaches were now lasting for weeks at a time without a break. I remember when I was working in the theater at the time, the cast would often look at me with such compassion and sadness because they knew what I was going through, and they didn't understand how I could keep working even. It got so bad that I carried a card in my pocket for the police, telling them that should you find me wandering around the streets looking like a drunk or a dope fiend, I'm not. I probably haven't slept in 7 or 8 days, and I'm just very sick. And one night, a dear friend of mine, an intimate friend of mine, Roselle, invited me to a party at her house. And during the course of the party, I had the sense that she was talking to someone about me and my headaches out of concern and love for me. And later she introduced me to this person who introduced himself as a doctor. And he said, I can see how you're suffering, and Rose Ellis told me about this, and I don't treat them myself, but I know of someone who's been very successful treating migraines. Can I refer you to this person? I said, sure. I was saying sure out of politeness, nothing else. I didn't think there was anyone who could help me. So he took out his business card and wrote down a name and a phone number on the back and handed it to me, and I stuck it in my pocket and forgot about it. But that night I had the mother of all migraine attacks. It felt as if someone had taken my head and placed it in a carpenter's vise and was turning it. And I thought my head would implode. I just couldn't believe that you could feel so much pain. And at about 6 in the morning, I took out this card and called this number, and it was an answering service. I left a message, and 2 hours later they called back and said, you have an appointment to be in this office in Euclid Avenue to see this gentleman, this doctor, at, it was 12 o'clock noon. Yeah. And at 11 o'clock I went downstairs, tried to get to drive, but I knew I couldn't drive. I couldn't see straight, so I took a bus up to the office. And when I got outside, I looked him up in the directory and saw that he was a doctor and a hypnotist. And that struck a chord in me, of course, because of my early childhood experience and one other that I'd had later. And I said, oh, it never dawned on me that hypnotism could be of any help. So although I wasn't like, oh boy, wow, you know, but it was at least, hey, okay, let's see what this is about. So I went up to his office, and when I got inside the door, as soon as I saw this guy, I was very turned off. He was very rude and crude, didn't even introduce himself, didn't ask me to sit down, nothing, just very ill-mannered it seemed. And he immediately began to ask me questions about my sexual background. Now this was in 1959, and it was not politically correct, even in a doctor-patient relationship, to launch into something like this, you know, off the top. And I was of the mind to just get up and leave. I was so uncomfortable, but what I thought was, well, Roselle and her doctor friend really went out of their way, you know, concerned, so what the hell have I got to lose? I'll, you know, sit through whatever the hell this guy's going to ask me. So he kept on this sexual path, you know, and I don't remember what I told him. I was very defensive, I remember that, and didn't really want to say very much. And then he says, I'm going to put you into hypnosis now, and we're going to find out what's causing your headaches and cure them. I said, oh, that sounds fine, go ahead. Oh, yeah. And he said, close your eyes. I'm going to count down from 100, and as I'm counting down from 100, you're going to go into a very deep trance. 100, 99, going deeper and deeper. 98, much deeper. And as he's doing this, what's going on in my mind is, this guy's a quack, a fruitcake. Doesn't know what he's doing. Just a real nutcase. And I'm even crazier than he is because I'm sitting here doing this. He's pretending that I'm in some deep trance and I'm, you know, such nonsense. And I said, how the hell would it go along with it? Get it through and get up and leave, that's all. And then he starts asking me more questions about my sexual nature. And I just tuned out entirely as far as I can recall. And I told myself, just sit here, get through this, and then get up and leave. That's all. And in what felt like just another 8 or 10 minutes, he's counting back up. 96, 97, 98. And I'm at the edge of my chair getting ready to get up and leave. 100, open your eyes. And I open my eyes, and right behind him is a clock. And I look at the clock, and I'm stumped. As far as I'm concerned, I've been there maybe 12, 15, 18 minutes. But according to the clock, it's been almost an hour. What happened? I didn't know, but I wanted to find out, so I just sat back and looked at him. And he looked at me and said, how do you feel now that you know why you've had these horrible headaches all these years? And I said, come again? What are you talking about? He says, that's a straightforward question. How do you feel now that you know why you've been suffering these violent headaches all these years? I said, what the hell are you talking about? And he looked at me and said, simple truth of the matter is, you've been suffering these headaches all of this time because you want them. And what? And at that moment I felt quite outraged and violent and wanted to give him something he didn't want. I mean, I really felt just bad enough I had to go through this ridiculous, silly nonsense. I'm in a trance and this, that, and the other thing, but now you're giving me this cock and bull story. I want these headaches, like I'm some kind of a mentally ill person. And I says, that's so, doctor. And he says, yep. And he says, and you don't have to see me again. I said, no kidding. No kidding. And I got up and I headed to the door, and he said, by the way, send me a check for $100. And I said, sure, I'll send you a check for $100. And I walk out the door cursing under my breath. Got to the elevators and I'm still cursing and my head is pounding away. And I go down to the first floor and I walk outside, and I was so happy because there was a light drizzle, just a slight drizzle, and I put my head up just to get some relief from the head. And I walked to the bus stop, my head pounding and still cursing under my breath at this joker for what he put me through. And I got to the bus stop and I waited for the bus a few minutes, and there was an old adage among smokers that if you light a cigarette, the bus will come quicker. Some of you remember that one? So I lit a cigarette. Sure enough, bus turns a corner, take a last drag, and I drop the cigarette into a puddle, and I remember going, and the bus pulls up, and the doors open. I go in, and the bus driver looks at me and says, well, get in already. Headache is gone. Vanished, like a light switch. That was September 29th, 1959. Quick math out there, 53 years about. In the 53 years since that happened, not only have I never had a migraine headache, but I have not suffered from even a tiny, tiny stress headache in all of these years. How did he know? How did he go with? Well, I think Rose had told a doctor friend enough about me personally, so he had a head start. He knew it was in the area of my sexual background. 5 years later, in a therapy group, I discovered the actual moment it began. Barely at the age of 13, my brother had walked into my room unannounced one morning and caught me in an embarrassing sexual act. And he had pointed his finger at me and shamed me. And I felt guilty. I had done something very bad. And indeed, I had been punishing myself for 13 years. And all of the medicines that they were able to treat me with, the injections, the pills, and the rest, hadn't done a thing to get to that root emotional cause, that guilt that I felt. Somehow that guy got to it, and I released it, and the headache was gone. Now, a couple important things to relate to here. Number one, I didn't like this guy. Didn't matter. Number two, I didn't think anything was going on. Something other people have said, right? I didn't think anything had happened. I said I thought he was a joker, just a fraud. Remember that. We're going to relate to that much later as well. Another reality that's very, very important here, going back to the first session in this series of classes when we talked about human emotions, that everything begins on an emotional level and then transitions into the physical, psychological, biological, and chemical. So what had started out as finger pointing and my feeling shamed and bad about myself, emotionally, had developed into an actual physical manifestation, and then biological and chemical as well. So those transitions do occur. What happens, unfortunately, is we end up treating those symptoms instead of dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is emotional in nature. And very important in terms of understanding hypnosis. So we're going to go back to that as well later on. So, why does hypnosis work? One, we go along with it. Somehow I went along with that hypnotist in Cleveland, even though I didn't want to. Fascinating, isn't it? I didn't want to be sitting there. But there was a part of me that said yes, or else I would have gotten up as soon as I sat down and he started asking me those questions I didn't want to answer. But I didn't. So somehow I did want to stay there. I did want to go along with it, and I did. The second reason that's important as to why we use hypnosis successfully, how it works. You go to a movie theater, you buy a ticket, you go and find a seat, you sit and you watch the commercials and the coming attractions, and then the feature film comes on, what you came to see. What do you experience as you're watching that movie?
Whatever's going on in the movie, I react to it.
How? What happens to you?
I get excited, or I get nervous, or I get sad, or whatever.
You relax, maybe?
What else?
You want to go along the ride.
Right? Is the movie real? No, it's fake. Cameramen and actors and film, all that stuff. But as we're watching it, we believe it. It's happening. I use the Born Identity. I read the book at least 5 or 6 times. I'm a Ludlam fan, and I saw the movie at least 3 or 4 times. I know it's nonsense. Jason Bourne being chased all over the damn planet by these terrorists. They can drop an atom bomb on his head, he'll survive. Right? Would you? Same thing happens if you watch play, unless it's a terrible play, poorly acted. You're right there, you're in it. It's real. Read a book, a novel. Read Lost Horizon. I remember reading Lost Horizon as a child, story of Shangri-La. I knew it was a book. I knew there was no Shangri-La. But every time I started, I was in Shangri-La. When we are programmed, which is a very natural process, the human mind does not distinguish between what is real and imagined. When programmed, the human mind does not distinguish between what is real and imagined. That, and going along with it, is why hypnosis works. So simple and pure. To be redundant again, it's not rocket science. It doesn't require any great skill to understand it. Hypnosis is relaxation and focus. It works because we go along with it, and because when programmed, the human mind does not distinguish between what is real and imagined.
What if somebody doesn't go along with it, or is that person a...
We'll get to that way. Yeah. Some people won't, for whatever reason, just like some people in the movie theater are going to yawn.
Right.
You know, they could be watching the greatest movie ever made, and they're going to yawn. Does hypnosis always work? No. There are 2 prerequisites for it to work. 1, you must want it to work. You must want to deal with whatever it is you're dealing with. You must want to quit smoking. You must want to lose weight. You must want to be more confident. You must want to build a better life. You can't fake it. You can't fake hypnosis. And I'll digress for a minute. You can't use it as a test. Some people try, terrible word, hypnosis as a test in order to prove that nothing will help them. And they can say, I tried it, it doesn't work, no. If you test it, you're misusing it, abusing it, and very foolish. Because all you do is prove to yourself that it's not going to work for you. And a lot of people do that with therapies in general. Right? People who go through every therapy there is, not to change or to grow or to deal with the problem, but to prove to themselves that nothing will help them. Then they can turn around and see, can't help me. Great defense, absolutely foolproof defense. I can't be helped. Tried everything. People come to me to lose weight. Within minutes, one of the first things they will say is, I have tried everything. Every scheme, every weight loss program, every diet, you name it, I've tried it all. And they don't work. No, you haven't tried it all. Not at all. There's something you haven't even gotten close to trying, and you are not going to get there by merely trying. Hypnosis shouldn't be tested. any more than any therapy that can help you should be tested. You should do it. You must want it to happen, and the other prerequisite is you must be capable of doing it. I would love to be able to get on a bench press and bench press 300 pounds. Presently, I can bench press approximately 40 pounds above my body weight, which is fabulous. I'm happy. That's great. At one time, I could get up as high as 245. But no hypnotism in the world is going to help me bench press 300 pounds. I'm not capable of doing it. If I use hypnosis to build my confidence and to increase my workout schedule, after 6 or 7 months, I might get back up to maybe 230, 235. But I'm never going to be able to bench press 300 pounds any more than I'm going to be able to change the color of my eyes without some kind of fancy surgery. So hypnosis, when broken down, comes up to be 6 salient points. 1, what is it? It's relaxation and focus. 2, why does it work? We go along with it, and when programmed, the mind does not distinguish between what is real and imagined, and it only works if you want it to, and if you're capable of doing it.
From God's on board, each day I dine, from the Bering Straits to Palestine. This spring, this brook will ring the bell. No need of wealth, you're in God's hotel. Rover, rover, this whole world over. Happy as me, you'll never see. Represent for the world. Rover, rover, this whole world over. Happy as me, you'll never see.
One should know though was Christ's motto, so do the same. Let heaven flow. No pills, no